So today we're going to talk about 4 important KPIs for cannabis dispensaries, and this could even be helpful for wholesale cannabis distribution businesses. And this presentation is brought to you by Green Growth CPAs. So while it's true that cannabis is still a developing market, that doesn't mean that best practices should be thrown, to the wayside, in favor of rapid growth. You really need to optimize the business and watch the numbers of the business and look at the story that these numbers are telling you. Now, it's important to track key performance indicators, which are KPIs, to make sure that your cannabis operation is running profitably. Hoping that things will just work themselves out will likely result in cash flow issues, which is very common in cannabis, and likely a swift exit from this competitive industry. Now, there are plenty of dispensaries where cannabis consumers can choose to shop at. Now, as a result, if you don't optimize for success, you will likely lose business quickly to your sophisticated competitors, and they don't even have to be that sophisticated to beat you out. Just looking at a few numbers like KPIs will allow them to beat you at your own game every day of the week. So let's review some of these KPIs so that you understand how your business is performing. But before we do, I need to let you know that the information contained in this presentation is meant for guidance purposes only and not as professional legal or tax advice. And further, it does not give any personalized legal, tax, investment, or any business advice in general. So what we're going to cover in this video, 5 topics here. So first, we're going to talk about the 3 levers of sales and profit for cannabis businesses, whether it's retail or even for wholesale and distribution. This is going to apply to you as well. Then we'll talk about absolute versus normalized sales data and statistics of all manners. Then we'll talk about time per transaction, average gross margin, and then labor deployment. So first, retail cannabis sales and profit. And again, this can also correlate to wholesale prices. Now, there are 3 main levers that you can pull as an operator to increase your total amount of revenue. Now, with sales, there's 2 levers. You're going to have the number of transactions and the average ticket amount. Those are the first 2 levers. You multiply those, right? The number of transactions and the average amount you get per transaction, and that will give you total sales. Now, that's that big number at the top. Now, how much are you actually keeping as profit? You're just going to multiply that by your average gross margin of the products. Okay, so those are the 3 levers: number of transactions, average ticket amount, and gross margin of your products. Now, in finance and any part of the industry, you have a few different goals, and we'll correlate these goals to the levers here. Now, goal number 1 is to reduce the friction for more transactions per day. You want to find all the optimization possibilities within the business to put more people through your business every day. And then to build on that, you want to incentivize clients or your customers or your guests, or however you want to describe them, to come more often, which means increasing their frequency. So if someone comes 2.2 times per month, you want them to come 2.5 times per month. And now we have increased the frequency 10%. Which could ultimately build up your revenue by 10%. That's just holding steady that the average ticket amount doesn't go down. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, the second goal here is improving your cross-selling, upselling, and bundling to increase your average ticket. The more that you can cross-promote items, upsell from a cheaper product to a higher expensive product, or bundling multiple products together, the higher your average ticket is going to be, which means that's the more money that your clients are spending within your 4 walls of the dispensary or with every invoice that they buy at the wholesale level. Now, the third goal here is offering profitable products to capture the most margin. Now, it's not just, get every product that's on the market. As you know, and we'll talk about later in this presentation, there are so many new brands all the time promising the world to you that they're the latest and greatest and the best and the baddest. But you need to find products that you can make a profit on. And then aside from profit of products is deploying your labor accurately. Now, you don't want to have too many people or too little people working because it will affect the transactions per day, because if you don't have enough people, you're not going to be able to put a lot of people through your line. At any rate, these are the 3 to 5 goals of a cannabis business operation to optimize these 3 levers. Again, the 3 levers are numbers of transactions, the average ticket amount, and the gross margin for products to calculate that profit. So let's hop into the first part here I want to talk about, which is absolute versus normalized sales data or statistics at any level of the business. Now, one core principle that you need to understand is the difference between, again, absolute and normalized data. Now, an example of absolute statistics is gross sales expressed in total dollars. So Mike sold $2,845 in product, right? This is a solid number. Now, a normalized statistic would be looking at gross sales dollars per hour worked. Now, we could say Mike sold $355 in product per hour. Now, look at the difference in this for a moment. When you look at an absolute statistic, it can be quite deceiving, right? One bud tender might report a huge amount of sales, but they may have worked much longer hours than their colleagues. So it might take Mike only 8 hours to hit the same sales total as Randy, who worked 19 hours, right? So 8 versus 19 hours. Now, if they're working on an hourly salary, it's not likely that these higher sales are translating to higher profit, especially if it takes more hours to get to there. So if you look at the Randy and Mike example, it costs you 11 additional hours in labor to make the same amount of sales between Mike and Randy, that 8 versus 19. Now that's a big deal, especially if you're paying these livable wages. You have taxes to pay on those wages because they're not 1099 for the most case. So you really have to be thoughtful on the normalized sales data. Now, normalized sales data allows you to compare the performance of different people in a more equitable way, right? Looking at their performance over a time period, a specific granular time period that you can attach costs to as well, right? We look at it sales per hour because you know what you're paying for every hour that person is within the 4 walls of the dispensary or in the 4 walls of your distribution center. So let's look a bit deeper in this with actual data just so you can visualize it. So as you see on the screen here, we have bud tenders on that first column, Sally, Jeremy, Jill, and Jeff, their gross weekly sales, their hours worked, and then their sales per hour. Now, in this example, it'd be very easy to assume that Jill is the best performing bud tender if you look at her gross weekly sales, which is the absolute statistic. But in reality, she's actually the worst performing one on the hourly basis. Look at it now. You got Jill, $1,800 in sales. She's killing it. She's crushing people. She's 3 times as more than Jeff in total sales, but she's worked almost over 10 times, 11 times as many hours as Jeff. Now, it's always important to see who performs the best per hour, which is that normalized statistic, because this offers you the ability to give the right bonuses and the right incentives to ensure that every bud tender is performing at their highest ability every day or even every hour that they show up to work. Now, one other consideration to look at is what we call statistical significance. Now, I don't want to get too deep into these things because these are just very, very basic high-level examples, but statistical significance is such that, look at Jeff. Maybe he had 3 amazing hours during a late Friday evening rush after a typical payday, right? Get paid, let's go get all of our products from the store. Now, you need to ask yourself, well, is he only getting the best shifts? Or what would happen if he worked 12 hours? Would he still be doing this hourly sales of $216.67? So when you see someone is only doing 3 hours of work and they're really crushing it, everyone else is doing at least 12 hours, well, what would happen if we extended their amount of hours that week to 10, 15, 20 hours? Would they be able to keep up that sales rate per hour? So what is the purpose of collecting data around this KPI or this key performance indicator? Well, a few things. It allows you to make decisions such as, hey, should you potentially cut your lowest performing bud tender every quarter or even every month? Or you can collect best practices from the best performing bud tender and then teach these tips to their peers and then roll it into your onboarding for your new hires. Maybe they have a really good way of greeting clients to break that wall down. There's a lot of trust built within the first 90 to 180 seconds, and now the client feels more inclined to take the recommendations of the bud tender who's very good at upselling the premium products. Or you may look at this data and say, all right, I want to integrate the method of all these people that, maybe they're not doing the best in these sales, right, in the total per hour, but you see they're doing a lot of good transactions. They're doing fast transactions. So you say, all right, the standard operating procedures are going to change for the business such that, hey, we need to do this, this, and this before they get to the counter. Maybe having a sign of, hey, make sure you have your ID and your recommendation out before you get to the front counter to make your purchases, or handing out pamphlets. And we'll get into this a little bit later, talking about the average transactions. The next one I want to talk about is time per transaction. Now, time per transaction can be a telling KPI that helps you support your team and set everyone up for success. Because the way you set up your building up the first way, or you set your dispensary up the first way, may not be the most optimized. Now, this KPI here, it helps you identify who is most efficient with their time and if there's any friction in the check-in, sales, or checkout process. Now, time per transaction tells you the number of minutes it takes for each transaction transaction to be completed. And you can measure this at different segments of the business. Again, we have the three parts: the check-in, the sales, and the checkout process. Now, you may want to look at the check-in separately from the sales process, then from the checkout process, because depending on how you have your dispensary set up, sometimes there's multiple stations that clients have to go through, right? The initial check-in window, then they make their purchase, then they pick up their cannabis maybe in a pharmacy style where they have to go to another window to actually get the dispensed cannabis. Now, being able to serve your clients in 5 minutes compared to 7 minutes means that you can potentially earn 28, 29% more revenue by saving 2 minutes per customer. Now, long lines and agitated clients really could cost you thousands of dollars every week in sales. So you need to create best practices and the best guest experience possible, because these clients have a lot of options on where they can buy their cannabis, especially if you're a licensed shop that has this high tax burden where clients are shouldering that burden and paying more. Why are they going to come there, right? It's all about the experience. So if you can provide that great guest experience that helps them get in and out quickly, but they feel like they've gotten exactly what they're looking for, now you're on the best path to success. Now, you may have the best salespeople in the world, but if your POS system crashes often, or you aren't providing enough training on how to use the checkout system, or there just is not enough bud tenders, then how are you going to have this great guest experience? So one thing that we suggest at least every month is to have a shift manager or a general manager or a regional manager, depending on the size of your operation. Have them spend a day in the dispensary, maybe not even a full day, just a good shift, a long shift, or even just during the busy hours, sit in the dispensary and then watch and see where the friction is at. Are products not labeled properly? So then people are having to attach labels a certain way. Maybe the handwriting of the label is not efficient. Maybe there's a way to print it out faster through the POS system. Or are employees fumbling with customer questions? Or are your SOPs just so bad and there's just really no cohesive way to have a consistent guest experience, right? If you have repeat clients and they were treated in a great way the first time they came through, they're likely expecting that for the second time. And if your SOPs are not, again, they're called standard operating procedures, so you want a standard experience. And if not every bud tender is following that to a T, then maybe you need to optimize, your training and optimize the flow of clients through the dispensaries for that consistent experience. Some other things you may need to do when you start to observe these things, and some suggestions that we give clients, is maybe create digital menus throughout the queue line so that people can see what's going on, what you're selling. Maybe in the waiting area, depending on how your dispensary is set up, having digital menus there, or a suggested, most purchased, or, our best products kind of page. You create one-page guides for guests to review products and then your offerings while they're sitting down or while they're in line, and they can pick it up at the beginning of the line. While they stand in line, they can review. Or you could upgrade the hardware and the processes to create a smoother checkout process. If you have a very old, antiquated POS system, maybe it's time to upgrade, get a faster system. Or if you're working on iPads and you have the first generation iPad, maybe it's time to step into 2020 and get the new version so that things go a little bit quicker. You could also think about reducing the number of available products to reduce that choice paralysis of the client. Sometimes when they have 15 options compared to 5, they don't want to make a choice as a client. They don't know, oh man, there's 5 top shelf of the same indica or the same, feel of a thing, right? The cannabis, sometimes we sell it now like this is a calming cannabis or this is an awakening cannabis. If you have 5 products that remedy the same problem, how do I know which one is the best for me? Especially if your bud tenders cannot explain in a concise way that this one is better from this one in this way for this particular client. Also, you could create repeat order capabilities or order history, especially if someone wants to get the same thing as they did last time they were in your shop and they just want to say, hey, give me the regular, or give me what I got last time. I forgot what the bottle was or what kind of strain it was or what the product was. Can you help me to understand what I got last time and give me that same thing? Next, I want to talk about average gross margin. Now, many dispensary owners have a difficult time choosing what cannabis products to add to their inventory, right? I said this earlier in the presentation. There's 10 new brands every week that are calling in, that are looking to have you carry their product. And, your clientele changes too. Sometimes as, your business matures, you realize, hey, we're really, really resonating with the older demographic, and you start to bring in more of that older demographic. You may need different products to serve different purposes for that clientele. sell. Now, how do you choose what products are going to be the best sellers and what's going to turn into dead stock later down the road? Well, customer purchasing data and a little bit of math, of course. So what was popular one week may become outdated the next week. So you really need to stay keen on these statistics of what's moving and what's sitting as dead inventory. Now, inventory management is a delicate balance of having enough products and making sure that they're profitable and constantly keeping your head up and looking for the new, fresh items to sell to your clients. Because some of these new brands that are calling may be the next hit. They may be the next best product for you. And this is where average gross margin comes into play. We start to look at these types of things. So let's review the profitability of products and kind of walk through an example of this. So in the chart here, you see we have 4 brands, brand A, B, C, and D. You have the MSRP, which is the manufacturer's suggested retail price, their gross margin, and then their units sold per week, and lastly, their gross profit generated for the entire sales period, whatever you're looking at here. Now, in this example, it's important to see the gross margin multiplied by the units sold per week, because you may say, oh, this one is a great margin. We marked it up 4 times. But if you only sell 2 of those compared to a lot more of a less profitable product, then you're not actually making that much money, and it's taking up the same amount of shelf space. Now, in this example, you see that the cheapest brand and the most expensive brand net the smallest profit, while the brands in the middle, which are going to be brands A and brands B, they bring in the most profit. Now, the challenge is that your team has to move products at a lower price point off the shelves faster to see a profit, right? Because if there's not a lot of markup, right, it could be still 100% markup, but that 100% on a lower base is not the same amount of profit. And then customers are also less willing to shell out money for these more expensive items as frequently. And what you may need to do, and we highly suggest that you do this, is develop training on upselling and identifying the opportunities to upsell, right? What are clients saying that makes them more suggestible to being able to purchase that higher priced cannabis, or find ways to create bundles that help to move that slow moving stock. So when you look at this table, what do you do with this information? So at a minimum, on a monthly basis, you should calculate what is selling and the respective margins and drop the worst performing brand or product. Now, we only have 4 products listed here, or 4 brands, but when you look at these SKUs in a normal dispensary, you're going to have 30, 50, maybe even 100 SKUs. But again, also use this information to look at opportunities to upsell, cross-sell, and move products by grouping them together or bundling them, and make this a more effective purchase. Now, when you start that bundling or upselling, this increases that average ticket amount. That's one lever we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. Now, the power of suggestion can make a big difference in your profit margin. So teaching your bud tenders how to suggest more expensive products, or by buying more products, this can greatly increase your profit margin. Now, one additional tip on purchasing, and I want to just put this out there, is to always, or almost always, order the smallest initial order. And if someone or a brand says, hey, we can't do that small of an order, remember that you're in control of this transaction. The brand needs you. You hold all the power. The brand holds no power in this transaction. Since you are the retailer, you have access to the end consumer, and they do not. So what you can say is, hey, if this test run goes well, then we'll make a larger purchase. And yes, there will be smaller margins on that initial buy order because you're not getting the economies of scale or getting a lower unit cost, but you also greatly reduce your downside of having dead stock. For example, if they say the minimum order is 3 cases, you buy that 3 cases and you only move 1, and you sold those at a discount just to see how people reacted to it, and now you're sitting on 2 dead cases, you can't always return that stuff back to the distributor. It depends on your distributor. You may have great terms with your distributor, and they may front you your product and they only get paid on what's collected from you. You never know. It's all about how you set up your business agreements, but at any rate, you want to try to make that smallest minimum order. One thing to build on that is you can even have the brand come in and do an in-store sale or a sampling of their product if that's permitted by your local regulations. Then that totally reduces the downside of your business. It also creates a unique experience, and maybe if that product's a hit, that brand is now associated with your space in your dispensary, and now people are looking like, hey, every Saturday there's a new brand that comes out and I want to go in on Saturdays. You can do this in-store sale or sampling on your slowest day in the dispensary. So if Tuesdays are your slowest day, then promote all throughout the week. Hey, we have 3 or 4 new brands coming in every Tuesday. Come and try their products for free. Who's not going to want to try free cannabis? There's a lot of clients out there that like free stuff, and this small incentive can help increase that frequency. Maybe they always come on Fridays because they get paid on Fridays, but then they come in on Tuesdays to sample products and maybe pick up an extra pre-roll. Now you're looking at additional penny profit. And the last statistic I want to talk about here is labor deployment. Now, it's very, very easy to overschedule or underschedule people. And the prime costs at a dispensary are COGS and labor. Now, we've already talked about COGS, but payroll is one aspect of your business that you can control by scheduling your team properly at the right times. Now, this means not scheduling too many people or too few people at any given part of the day. Because you have too few employees in the shop, then you can't serve customers quickly, which then leads to poor customer experience that destroys brand loyalty. Then people don't come maybe ever again. So you really need to have the right amount of people, because if you schedule too many people at once, you're burning through cash unnecessarily. So how do you tell how many people need to be working at one time? What you're going to do is look at the number of transactions per hour for every hour that you're open, for every day that you're open. Now you can combine these into weekday versus weekend. It really depends on how granular you want to look at this report. But you're going to create a report, spend some time with it to see when you should have more or fewer employees on the clock. And as a bonus, if you correlate this data with the average time per transaction during those day parts, you will be operating at maximum efficiency. You will be at pro status. Now, we're not going to go too deep into that now because I could talk for an additional 40 minutes on that. But when you start to look at multiple statistics together in a day part, that is very powerful data. So let's look at this on the screen here. You see 2 charts, weekday versus weekend, and this is every time of the day that they're open and the number of clients coming through. And you see during the weekday at noon, a lot more clients, twice as many as the opening hour. 50 clients are coming in. And then later in the day, after the workday is completed, you get a lot more clients. So this is when you need to schedule the most people. Maybe have a skeleton crew from 1 to 4, and they check in at 4:45, make sure their till is counted in properly, and get ready for that 5 to 7 rush. On the weekend, you see it's kind of the opposite. And again, these are just sample numbers here. And you say, all right, well, during 2 to 5 p.m. on the weekends is when we have the most people. So let's not have a lot of openers and let's not have a lot of closers. Let's have a fair amount of midday people here. Now, again, that one additional column you could have to the right of number of customers is time per transaction, because you have different type of people come in at different times of the day. So maybe you have your newer clients that like to come in at opening because they know that it's going to be slower and that it's a longer time per transaction. Well, then let's start to sit down in those early hours of the business and say, oh, what's happening? Who's coming in? Is it more new patients compared to recurring patients or recurring clients? So these are the kind of nuances to your data that you have to peel back. Again, I don't want to go too deep, but this is just one way to look at labor deployment. And the reason that this statistic is so important is that sales payroll is typically, and in most cases, non-deductible under 280E because it does not add to cost of goods sold. This is an SG&A expense, right? So it's a sales expense. Now, very rarely is this going to be deductible under 280E. So I hope this presentation has brought you some value to help you understand some basic high-level statistics and how those can impact the business, pulling the numbers up and down, pulling these levers up and pulling them down to create more sales and then trickle down to more profit. Now, if you need help with optimizing your cannabis dispensary operation or even your wholesale operation, then reach out to Green Growth CPAs via our website at greengrowthcpas.com or give us a call at 800-674-9050. We do all the taxes and the finances and the numbers, but we also correlate those numbers to actual in-store operations and giving you these suggestions that are correlated specifically to your store to making sure that you have the best operation, because maybe what worked for the dispensary down the road or in a different state is not going to work for your setup. Again, there's 3 to 4 basic setups for dispensaries. So we want to make sure that the best practices that we're giving to you and optimization strategies correlate directly to your business. So if you would like that type of engagement or you need help with that, then reach out to Green Growth CPAs via our website at greengrowthcpas.com or give us a call at 800-674-9050. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.